Hello friends, this is Carrie and welcome back to I Like Reddit channel. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. Friends, I figured we could say goodbye to this awful year, maybe also pretend like it didn't ever happen, with 4 stories out of 2 different subreddits, JustNoHOAs and FHOAs. Let's begin. Our first story is posted by Tough Cookie 24/7. You can't put a lien on a house not in your community. So this happened years ago when I was in elementary school, so maybe 15 years ago, and I was living in Florida at the time. Anyone who lives in Florida knows how often new gated communities just pop up. So our neighborhood was established, and has been before even I moved into the house. And the house once belonged to my uncle. We had a neighborhood watch, but no HOA. The gated community was finally built, and people were moving in. Now we don't have a bad neighborhood, but we have some strange colored houses. Lime green and magenta with giant metal lizards hanging all over it is one such example. Our house was simple, hand brick and half concrete painted white. It stood out compared to some of the other houses. The new gated community is an HOA community, and they thought they ruled over all. Soon people in our neighborhood were receiving fines for their house color choices, their unsightly cars, non-approved mailboxes, and other nitpicky things. My parents received some for my dad's boat being in the driveway and even our unruly yard. We had a bougainvillea, which grows like crazy, and we were constantly trimming it. And we even got a fine for our fence. The old fence was chain link and the new fence was a wooden privacy fence. Don't ask me why there was 2 different fences. My uncle only fenced in part of our house, but it was still a good fence, so my dad didn't want to rip it out. Well, my mom and dad would pitch anything. They saw this coming from the gated community as they had fancy stationery. This went on for maybe 4 or 5 months, and we would revive fines for not meeting the HOA standards and other violations. We talked to our other neighbors who received them too. They tried to call and complain, but were given the runaround and decided to pitch the mail as well. My mom received a phone call from her bank. They started to question her about a lien on the house that had just appeared in the system. My parents had less than a year left on the payments for the house. They always paid extra every month for the house loan and were always on time. My mom was super confused and said there shouldn't be a lien. We didn't have any reason for one. It turns out the gated community filed liens on almost every house in our neighborhood. My mom told the bank the situation and called a lawyer. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I know a lot of the members of the HOA faced felony fraud charges, and it was a pretty big mess, with a pretty big lawsuit against the HOA board. We were able to pay off the house after the lawsuit. We even had a big celebration on one of the roads with a huge cookout. We met people we didn't even know before. I even made some new friends with some kids I didn't even know existed. People moved out of the gated community due to the bad press, and many of the houses stood vacant for a long time. When we moved away, many of the houses still stood vacant, like a ghost town. Last I heard, the name of the community was changed and the houses were beginning to fill up again. So I guess the lesson would be, leave the brightly colored houses alone and mind your own business. Our next story is posted by Dragon Rider 1964. As requested, here's another HOA story. After my previous post about my family farmland surrounded by an HOA, I've been asked to post a short story about some of the other incidents that have happened. This is from a few years ago. I am in Florida and on mobile, so please excuse the formatting issues. The rehash. My great-grandfather purchased 3,000 acres in Florida in the 1800s. It has been in my family and a working farm ever since. After my father passed away, the land was divided between my brother and sister and myself. My brother and sister sold their portions to a development company, and at the same time I purchased a neighboring 850 acres. On to the story. After the development company built up the area with single-family homes, they transferred control to a new HOA, which became officially registered in 2016. It was at this time that unstamped letters began appearing in my mailbox. The first was the introduction to the new HOA, including about a 20-page CC&R, which was essentially a contract that had so many rules and regulations. Since my family land predates the HOA well over 120 years, I'm not obligated to join any such group, so I ignored the letter and started marking them return to sender. Now this alerts my postal carrier, who questions who puts unstamped mail in a mailbox, and he took those letters and went to have a conversation with the HOA about the illegal use of a mailbox. Now while this is a farm, I was not using it fully, but instead, at the time, about a dozen rescue animals as well as 3 quarter horses. I arrive home to find a pair of cars at the entrance of my driveway, blocking my access. My driveway is about a quarter of a mile long, so I parked and walked. At my house, I found my wife arguing with 3 people, 2 men and a woman, who were demanding to be allowed their right to search my property inside and out. After a quick briefing, I inform my trespassers of their violations, and then I give them 10 minutes to get off my property and remove their cars before I tow and impound them. These self-righteous individuals were not budging, so I walk one of them to my barn and start up something inside, and back out a older model Holmes tow truck and start backing down the driveway. They ran to get in their cars and were gone before I got to the end of the driveway. Now this would be nice if it ended there, but it didn't. But then there wouldn't be much of a story. I started receiving fines, yes, in the mail and unstamped. This actually got our local postmaster involved. It's illegal to use a mailbox for anything other than mail. It's a federal offense. I even got a fine for calling the postmaster on them. The HOA had to pay $10,000 fine for unauthorized use of the USPS system. Fast forward about 6 months and my wife notices that there's a lien on our house and property. This is where I contacted my property rights attorney, who immediately filed with local government and finance agencies our dispute to the legality of the lien. It took a couple of months, but the lien was dismissed when the originator failed to show up to the hearing. But it does not end there. I received another large packet via certified mail detailing all the fines that I have incurred since the HOA came into existence, and they demanded immediate payment. Included in this was a $500 fine for not signing the CC&Rs, a $1,000 fine for not allowing the board members access to my property to search it, and a $10,000 fine for repayment to the HOA for the HOA breaking federal law. And the list goes on and on. My attorney laughed her butt off and sent a cease and desist letter, as well as a demand that all further correspondence must be directed to her office. That lasted about 6 months until my wife again noticed a new lien on our property. WTF, I thought? So back to my attorney, and more laughing. Turns out the HOA put a lien on the land that I purchased, still separate from my family's land, and so the steps above were repeated. During this time, while my wife was at the hospital delivering our second child, everyone was there to support her. The HOA trespassed again and started searching through my property, including its barns, the garage, and the outbuildings. They even tried towing several vehicles that I had on my land that were not licensed. Yeah, they're there for farming use. Picture a rusty old pickup being used to haul hay and feed, an old car with no doors, which we used to check out the field and search for animals. Now they were caught in the act by the local sheriff's deputy who was just doing a drive-by. No one was arrested and I chose not to press charges. However, this infuriated the HOA and another large packet arrived with more fines on top of all the previous fines. Another trip to my attorney and more laughing. This time she contacted the county clerk's office and managed to stop another lien that was in the process of being posted. This time, in order to post a lien, the HOA would need to show up at the hearing and explain. Yep, they did not show up and the lien vanished. Now, just a reminder, this is in Florida. My family and property are not part of the HOA. I hope you enjoyed. If you're enjoying the content so far, please put a heart emoji in the comment section down below. Our next story is posted by This One Time on Reddit. I fought an HOA and I won. This story takes place in Ontario, in a city called Kawartha Lakes. I hope I said that right. One of the worst municipalities in all of Ontario in which to live. There's poverty, there's crime, drug addiction, and a culture of prideful ignorance, and die-hard partisan voters that will vote against their best interests time and time again. And if you paid any attention to the news recently, their OPP attachment shot and killed a 1-year-old. The city council are looting their tax base to provide free educational opportunities for underqualified staffers they hired, holding secret meetings behind the public's back, and in one case spent over $140K to fight a lawsuit that was levied against them after they blocked a brand new business's access road because some city council members owned competing businesses. They were fined $70K and spent another $70K of taxpayer dollars to appeal and lose. That's all the backstory. Suffice to say, it's a city run by uneducated rubes and inhabited by some of the most apathetic voters I've ever encountered. My old man was an original property owner of an unassumed road for over 50 years. For the uninitiated, this means that although the city owned the road, they are not responsible for maintenance, grooming, etc. Beyond the scope of the limited service agreement they made with the single property owner, who we later found out forged signatures, claimed he represented the entire road. The LSA basically meant they would be doing 2 gradings per year, though they only actually provided 1. About 20 years ago, some city idiots moved up onto the road and decided they would create an HOA. They didn't get insured, they didn't incorporate, and they actually thought that they could go around forging signatures on city documents and charging residents money for essentially nothing. This all came to a head about 10 years ago, when my dad refused to pay until the 2 chuckleheads in charge showed him how they spent the money. Rather than provide a fair accounting of the neighborhood funds, the president and the treasurer both decided they wanted to sue for the money owed. Well, we went to court, and as it turns out, you don't get to just declare yourself the head of an association that doesn't exist. Turns out you can't collect money from residents and spend it on cookware and paying your underqualified, uninsured friends to do road work. Turns out perjury is frowned upon in small claims court. They found out the hard way. I discovered in their court filings examples of perjury, fraud, and general dishonesty. They manufactured documents and got caught doing so. They were given multiple options to settle in court, but turned them all down, instead choosing to self-destruct in the most absurd and stubborn way available to them. None of their witnesses showed up. They brought literally no evidence with them to court, instead relying on the phrase, "It's not rocket science," and they somehow assumed the judge would just accept "it's not rocket science" as some kind of evidence or somehow lending credibility to their claims. He didn't. The HOA lost and ended up owing us money. It dissolved immediately afterwards, and if the story ended there, it would make sense, but it wouldn't be a very interesting story. But you're not here for just a good guys win story. You want satisfaction. Turns out one of these 2 genius old men fancied themselves in charge of an HOA and couldn't accept defeat. Our driveway lights started to disappear, and someone was blocking our culvert in the middle of the night and washing out the road in front of my dad's house. Minor vandalism was happening almost on a nightly basis. So I came home late one night, and sure enough, there was a 70-year-old idiot thrashing around an April temperature swamp, having fallen in after blocking the culvert. You can see in this picture that OP has posted that he got his shirt tangled under branches and can't get out. We had to haul him out because he was so drunk and suffering from hypothermia that he couldn't even move. Then we called the cops, and he got yelled at, trespassed, and none of our driveway lights ever went missing again. The cops let me keep the trash can lid that he was using to block our culvert. Yay, free lid! Moral of the story is don't take crap from HOAs. They may look official, but I'll bet you most HOAs are doing something shady that reflects poorly on them in court, and should you find yourself at odds with them, use it against them. Sorry about the noise in the background. My neighbor across the street has a waterless lawn, and so it takes him roughly 3 to 4 hours every week to do his lawn maintenance. So, sorry about the leaf blower and any other noise. Anywho, our final post is by StripeyCat86. Man defeats HOA he's not even a member of. This story was shared with me years ago by a late family friend. He was an avid ham radio operator who had numerous antennas scattered around both his front and backyards. His subdivision was older construction and did not have an HOA, so there was no issue with this. However, his lot backed up to another subdivision that was newer and did have an HOA. You can probably see where this is going. One day, he got a knock on his door from one of these Karen types. She had just bought the house behind him, and needless to say, she was not a fan of all of his antennas. She started rattling off all these supposed HOA rules that he's violating, along with the typical, "They're a safety hazard, an eyesore, they're lowering my property value and hurting my feelings, etc." arguments. He tried to politely explain that his house was in a different subdivision and thus not part of the HOA. She was having none of it. After a few more weeks and a few more interactions that went just like the first one, he had gotten a threatening form letter in the mail from the HOA's law firm. Coincidentally, his lawyer was a partner in the same firm. One phone call got that line of communication shut down instantly. With that defeat, Karen finally gave up, and he was able to go back to living in peace. Karen moved away about a year later. That's all the stories I have for today. Big thank you to the OPs for posting their stories to JustNoHOAs and the FHOA subreddits. Links to their original posts will be in the description box below. If you enjoy the video, please comment, share, like, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell notification to let you know when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.